Welcome to the House of Esor podcast. I'm your host, William, and joining me today will be Derek.
Hello.
And Sean.
Hello.
And on this episode, we'll be discussing Jacob's Ladder, the 1990 film, not 1999, 1990 film that had Tim Robbins in it, and Ving Rhames, pre-Pulp Fiction, and some other people in there. And it is not the remake, because when Sean said that, he's like, oh, yeah, it's on Amazon. I was like, oh, the new one is? But no, it's the original one. Yeah, the new one.
Yeah, I didn't mean the remake when I mentioned we should watch Jacob's Ladder.
Yeah, because this is a movie that I had watched decades ago, I think in middle school, and I hadn't seen it since. So a lot of this was still pretty fresh to me because I remember like the overall story, but I didn't remember all the details.
Here goes how things get when you get older, you know, because we're like early 30s now, William and I. When you told us before you watched it like a decade ago, you realize middle school was like 2 decades ago now, right? Yeah. I would do that all the time too, but you said a decade ago. It wasn't that long.
Because I think there was
10 years but yeah, middle school, I would barely remember anything from this.
Because I think there was a weekend where I watched both this and House, the horror film, which both had Vietnam stuff involved in it.
Oh yeah.
Well, I'm trying to think. When I first got Netflix, this is one of the, and that was when it was just DVDs only. So I remember I got like this and something else. Maybe, what was the movie where the little girl in the red coat and the dad's
Don't Look Now?
Don't Look Now. I think I got Don't Look Now and this.
That was a good choice.
It was like the first two I got. And because if back in the day, I don't know if Bravo still does this or not, but you all probably seen it. They used to do like a top 100 horror films.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I saw the scene that they showed on that when they're talking about this was the dance scene where he's like dancing, you get the devil's tail. So that, and then remember like the next one was Don't Look Now. So I got both of them and ended up watching them because like Netflix back originally, because I know you can probably still do the DVDs. Nobody does probably.
Yeah. It's like DVD.com.
Like they had just a bunch of really weird stuff you couldn't get anywhere else because Wild and Woolly used to exist here. You could go there and get some of that stuff too. But I think probably that was when did that close? Around
it closed probably
last 5 years.
Yeah, last 5 years. Because actually that's why I watched Don't Look Now is I went to Waldo. Again, the value of your home video store is locally run. I went there and in the they have sections of the employee picks.
Yeah.
Or they have a wall and they have a bunch of stickers. Like if a bunch of people like this movie and Don't Look Now was on there, and I had like 5 or 6 stickers where everybody recommended that, and I was like, all right, I'm digging this. I'd never seen anything from Nicholas Roeg, and then I was like Donald Sutherland, all right. But yeah,
this movie is very. I remember when I first watched it, it just reminded me a lot of Silent Hill and some of the.
Yeah, so it's one of those things where like I said, once again, seeing this back in the 90s before Silent Hill was even out, I kind of forgot about all that and didn't realize how much or how heavily Silent Hill pulled directly visuals from this movie. And was definitely referencing that, and even some of the story elements of Silent Hill was very similar to this film. And two, so I know before we started, Sean, you showed us the trailer.
Yeah.
We watched the trailer for the remake that's coming out.
Yeah, so that one apparently had been shelved, I guess, and now it's supposed to come out August 23rd of this year. And all I had heard was that, like, this, about the remake. The only thing I'd heard was, hey, they did a remake, and it features a predominantly black cast. And I didn't even think about it, but yeah, so essentially they updated it to the Iraq War, which
makes sense.
Yeah, but and now it's not even like, this is like a specific 3-year war. Like he could have been there from 2000 whatever, 3 or 4 till now.
The Vietnam War,
multiple tours.
The original movie being made in 1990, there was a definitive beginning and ending point for the Vietnam War.
Yeah,
with talking about people being deployed overseas, Iraq, Afghanistan, different countries.
Or just in the Middle East in general.
People are still in the Middle East. Yeah. So you could have something that's still going on today.
As they said, pretty soon we're going to hit where somebody gets deployed there and they weren't even born on 9/11. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, and two, like, things that you have that are interesting with, like Jacob's Ladder, like doing a remake, is I feel like there's been a lot of movies. Well, I guess we'll discuss full
spoilers.
Spoilers for the plot of the film.
You're talking a movie that's 29 years old.
Yeah, because it's on Amazon Prime. And for the record, I had not seen it. I had bought the Blu-ray like a while back for like $5, probably like 5 years ago or something. I had the Blu-rays. Like, I need to watch this film. I've never seen it.
It's got
and I just never got around to it. And kind of the big reason is like, these podcasts, like, okay, we have like 2 we do every 2 weeks. We used to do it every week, and then I'd watch something else. And I figured that this would be one we would do. So I was always kind of waiting, like, okay, when are we all going to do it? Because it'd be a first time for me too. So I just never got around to it. But yeah, so the remake does not look as cheap as some people were saying. I mean, what do you guys think about that remake trailer?
I mean, it didn't look...
I'm not expecting a 10 out of 10.
No, but it didn't
I've seen
look
worse.
bad.
I've seen worse. Like, it doesn't look like the both of the Day of the Dead remakes.
No,
actually, the second one wasn't as bad as the first.
It's just one of those things where if somebody had never seen the original Jacob's Ladder,
I think this would look cool then.
And two, if they're going for a completely different audience than was into that original film, because I do think that a lot of movies that have effective sequences and scary effects and things that were disturbing at the time don't do as much for audiences today. And there are some people that just straight up refuse to watch a movie that doesn't look like it was made in the past 2 years. They don't like anything that looks aged at all. So, like, if somebody hasn't seen the original or hasn't seen stuff that's derivative of the original, then this could be interesting. But I know, like, a lot of movies have had the plot of soldier comes back that had experiments done on them overseas and doesn't remember things and slowly remembers it and confronts that. Like, there's been a lot of movies that have that plot. There's been a lot of TV series that have plots like that involved in it. And I think that there's not going to be a ton of new material there. Like, people might be surprised by the ending when they get there if they've never heard of the original. But the trailer did kind of give a little bit away. Well, I guess it's also, too, if you knew what the quote was in reference to that they were making over the trailer.
Yeah.
But, yeah, so, I mean, I think...
Oh, and by the way, too, I forgot. Somebody just saw this article. Somebody mentioned that they saw it on DirecTV a while back, like a couple weeks ago, the movie. So I guess they don't have much confidence in it. And I don't remember what they said about it, but I saw on Twitter, because I'm looking at this IndieWire article, and they said, like, you know, open... man, it said it opened in theaters. Oh, no. That's something else about DirecTV. But somebody did say they thought they saw it like 2 weeks ago on DirecTV or something. But it's also supposed to open. It's so weird.
Well, it's one of those movies that, like, I'd not heard anything about Jacob's Ladder remake at all until literally just what we're talking about the podcast. But it's one of those movies too. Like, I think it's a very good movie, but I don't know if it's something I'd be like excited for a remake about.
So I don't know.
I mean, I guess they, you know, again, updating some of the themes and applying it. You know what I mean? Like, that's at least with. Unfortunately, with new wars and stuff, it's like, oh, there's a new generation. You can kind of, and apparently they want to do more of a homage to it instead of just a direct remake, which it seems like that because, I don't know, there's definitely seem like there's some differences.
Well, I think that's the right direction to go to, because if you just do a direct remake, because there's a lot of horror films that do remakes or reimaginings or whatever, and I think that this movie, like the original Jacob's Ladder, isn't super culturally relevant. Like, it's a movie that has fans, and it was a minor hit when it came out and grew a fan base over the years.
Yeah, it's more of a cult
but it's not something, you know, not even comparing quality-wise, but, you know, like the Blair Witch Project. If you were to do, I know they did that sequel a few years ago, but if you had done like a straight-up reboot, relaunch of it, like, people who don't watch horror films were aware of what that movie was.
Oh, yeah.
And with a movie like Jacob's Ladder, it feels like you have a movie that, you know, has name recognition amongst, like, film fans and horror fans, but not something that the general person from that era probably remembered. Because, you know, you have different stuff in, you know, like Tim Robbins, who's been in a bunch of stuff. A few years later, he's in Shawshank Redemption.
Yeah, Tim Robbins is great. I've watched a lot of his stuff recently.
You know, it had like a young Macaulay Culkin in it before Home Alone. So, you know, you just have people in it that you would recognize, but like Home Alone has name recognition and everyone's aware of it.
By the way, this came out like a month or so, I don't know, slightly prior to Home Alone.
But
he almost looked older.
In this movie?
I thought so.
I thought he looked younger, but I mean, maybe it's just the element of like, since
what he was wearing and everything too.
Yeah, but yeah. So the trailer, like, I'm not sure. Like you said, it doesn't really have a ton of confidence in it. How they keep doing like the release stuff and shelved it for a while and all that. I don't think it's going to have a huge impact. Because once again, like a cerebral horror film that has, you know, that works on a metaphorical level and stuff, I'm not sure how well that sells in trailers to the general audience.
The only way that really works is if the imagery in the movie is so, like,
out there,
it gets out there and upsetting that people are like, man, you got to see it just for that. Because then, you know, people, it's still probably going to make a ton of money, but it could, you know, probably get a cult following or, you know, maybe just live on with streaming services and stuff. But if it's just kind of like depends on how they go about it. Because, I mean, that stuff is popular. People love psychological, paranormal stuff. but it has to be done the right way.
Well,
and
but I
just
think-
looking at the trailer, it's like it doesn't look like a bad movie, but it looks like something like if it was on Netflix.
Yeah,
I'd probably
it's not gonna
check it
get your
out.
butt in a seat, and maybe that's
But,
you know, that could be part of the reason why they shelved it. They're like, hey, audiences aren't responding well to this trailer as far as, you know, when they're comparing it to whatever scary
But to be
stories
fair,
to tell
like,
in the dark. You know,
but
watching that trailer.
would we have watched Jacob's Ladder if it was released? Would you watch that in theaters? Or would
Yes,
that been,
yeah,
or would that
yeah,
been a movie like
yeah.
I'll wait till it
Yeah,
hits?
who knows?
Because that movie I think made its budget back. So I think it might just be right on par for course how the original did,
Mm-hmm.
and it might just be something that's more entertaining to watch. Maybe at your house or something like that, but
Yeah.
it's something that like if it was hit streaming, I would probably check it out. But I don't know if I necessarily want.
There's a lot of things I've watched that were on streaming services that I would not have spent the money to otherwise.
Yeah, and even
yeah.
if it was good, you're like, I'm kind of glad.
Yeah,
it's on
so the
streaming.
trailer-
but like all remakes, at least hopefully, you know, it got us to do the original for the podcast.
Yeah, maybe they can
Finally, you know, I
drive-
was like, okay, there's a somewhat of a reason, a topical reason to watch Jacob's Ladder.
Well,
Yeah,
it's
so-
just, it's
Yeah.
interesting.
And I guess now it's going to be hitting its 30th next year.
Yeah.
That probably would have been more of a reason, but you know.
Yeah, so getting into the actual film Jacob's Ladder from 1990.
Yeah, full spoilers.
Full spoilers. So it's directed by Adrian Lynn. Like I said, the cast had Tim Robbins. Then it had Elizabeth Pena, Danny Aiello, Mike Craven. Jason Alexander was in it. Like I said, Ving Rhames. And it was a movie that, so it was 1990. It was an hour and 53 minutes. It was a movie that I think that made around like $26 million domestically.
Yeah.
So, pretty close.
That's all it made. It made
pretty close to its budget. Not a movie that at the time, just based on the theatrical release, would be considered a moneymaker. But it's a movie that over the years of video sales and things like that probably eventually turned a profit for the studio. But
And the
something
director's
that-
name is what? Adrian Lynn?
yeah.
I mean, you know, and he did prior to that, Flashdance, 9.5 Weeks, Fatal Attraction, a few years before that, and then afterwards, Indecent Proposal, remake of Lolita, and Unfaithful. He's got
Well, and
deep
because
water
I mean,
coming up.
he's done a
Yeah,
couple.
like he has a
of-
pretty solid.
Yeah,
like,
reading
it's pretty solid.
reading the or reading some of the information about the movie, at one point like Ridley Scott was interested in making it. And I think at one point they had eyed Tom Hanks for the lead in the film.
It would have been interesting.
Yeah, so
I mean, Tim Robbins is great in it. It's just been funny to see Tom Hanks in a movie like this.
yeah, but so the movie itself, and two, like apparently there was a number of minutes of footage cut from the film that were mostly from the last third, from like the hospital and other disturbing stuff. So there's a lot of that stuff I'd be interested to know if like the Blu-ray copy you have, if it has like more deleted scenes.
I know,
or-
and actually, I meant to dig into the special features on it, and I forgot to because I also just said I'm just going to watch it on Amazon, even though Blu-rays look a little bit better. It was
sometimes
one of
it's
those-
easier
Yeah.
to instead of digging out. But yeah, I mean, like I'd be interested to go and watch the deleted scenes because it said that stuff was removed that was considered disturbing, or it's like I want to see that because what was disturbing in 1990 to the general audience today
Yeah, I mean,
would
it just
not.
again like when because they are so similar in imagery. Like once you watch something like or played something like Silent Hill or seen this stuff or Resident Evil or any of these other like psychological thriller video games where you have imagery like this, like Doom, and it's just kind of like, that's not.
Well, I mean, I
that.
think so.
Did
Was
you
it-
ever play The Suffering? It was on Xbox One and PS2.
Was that the prison game or something?
It was like horror, but yeah, I don't know if you were in like a prison or what. William, I know I played the demo in your dorm room, and I don't know if you were in there though. Because with Evan, I don't remember if you were in there, or maybe I checked it out from work because I worked at GameStop at the time. But essentially, the hospital imagery is the same thing. Like you go in the corner, there'd be people stretched up against the walls. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And like blood, like the hospital scene from that reminded me of
and
The
two,
Suffering.
So like Silent
very
Hill,
strongly.
you have like the jittery moving characters, you have the half-person character, you have the entire idea that you have, like I said, full spoilers, that you have a character who died and the story is just them coming to grips with being dead and moving on. So like very similar story and very similar imagery. And it's just funny how those different elements, because like Silent Hill was something, it's like after I watched this movie again, it's like, oh shit, they really did just pull a lot from that. But like you said, the
Silent Hill, Jacob's Ladder, Resident Evil, Night of the Living Dead.
Yeah. But like so with the movie in general, like so the Tim Robbins performance, I think he gives a great performance in the movie, because he gets to play kind of a couple of realities. He gets to play the flashback to the Vietnam stuff. he gets to play the flashback to his family with like Macaulay Culkin and stuff, and then the present day when he's with the new partner. And
I love that jumping of like the whole confusion of what is real, what isn't. You know what I mean? Like I think that's handled very well and balanced really well. And the first half, it really does a good job of keeping up with the mystery. The way it presents those, he wakes up from that cold bath. Doesn't he wake up from the cold bath and then he wakes up
with
in bed
his
with his
prior ex-wife?
Yeah, I mean, like
I
think that was handled so well, and that it's sometimes hard to make that stuff work, and you don't see a lot of films try to do that, really.
And also, too, this is also kind of like M. Night Shyamalan territory, especially something like Sixth Sense, because this is kind of very similar to that.
Well, I mean, I think, too, Sixth Sense is even, too, kind of that idea, but I think with this, that it's not a big twist reveal, it's kind of revealed throughout, like when so because
I knew that he was dead essentially, just because I knew, you know what I mean.
Yeah.
So, and I was like, all right, I wonder if this is going to totally deflate the film, but they kind of let you in on it pretty early, and I was like, do I know this because I already knew it in the back of my head? But then like they keep letting you know, and they keep telling basically, oh, you were dead or you're dead.
Because there's a few times that he asked people, "Am I dead?"
Yeah,
and then when he's in that hospital in the third act, they tell him you're dead.
Yeah,
and this is your home. And so I mean. There's all these like things left out. So you chronologically, so you have some scenes in Vietnam where it shows the soldiers are sitting there just kind of talking, and there's an attack that initiates, and you see some of the soldiers go into seizures and things like that. And then you see where Tim Robbins' character gets stabbed, but then he wakes up on the train. And the train was a sequence. That was what I mostly remembered, that and what the ending was.
Yeah.
Because the train is where he goes to get off. The exit is blocked off, so he can't exit the train station. So then he tries to go down the tracks, and almost gets hit by the train and sees all the creepy, scary people on the subway, on the train, that are kind of looking at him and look kind of like demonic. And I think, too, they said the entire movie, all the special effects and everything was captured in camera. The way they got the jittery effect of people moving quickly was they just had people move normally, and they shot it at 4 frames a second. So when they ran it at 24, it looked jittery and jumpy, and added to the creepy effect. So I think a lot of times having that be done as a in-camera effect is far more interesting than if it's done digitally. I mean,
I think it can be more unsettling because there's just something real about it also, like real but unnatural versus totally not real. You know what I mean? And when you do it digitally.
Yeah, because I think because when we were doing that short film Shared, I had done a bunch of camera tests, and I had done stuff where I shot it at 24 frames and was moving weirdly, and then went in and removed a bunch of frames.
Yeah.
And it gives an effect that approximates what this did, but it looks better to shoot it at the low frame rate and speed it up.
Well, something too, like I'd have to go back and watch a lot of movies, but this is one of the first movies that kind of did that jittery movement that was like mainstream. Because you try to think about it, and it's like, because to me that seems more of like a 90s, 2000s.
9 Inch Nails music videos always
like
did that. Yeah.
But like you think about like when mainstream.
Yeah,
like,
late 90s 9 Inch Nails stuff was
and
really.
then you had like all the, you had The Shining, which did that, and you had The Grudge, and then you had like a lot of those 90s, late 90s, early 2000s horror movies that kind of took from that. But then this was like 10 years prior, so I just wonder, was this one of the
Shining
first?
did it?
Did I say The Shining? No, it's
The Ring?
The Ring, sorry.
Okay.
The Ring. The Ring and The Grudge. So you kind of had
I thought for some reason maybe the Shining TV series.
Yeah, I don't know
and
why
I was like,
I
didn't see that.
I was just thinking of the
I'll
Ring.
trust you because you said 90s.
Yeah. But you had like The Ring and The Grudge that kind of did that, and then you had like a couple other movies around then that kind of American copies of that stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, like so the basic idea is so then once you get where he's living with his girlfriend and working at the post office, they go to a party. He hallucinates and sees like a creature, her grinding on a creature that then stabs her.
It's like one of the more like, because like we talked about this before, maybe like there's like when Bravo would show this stuff, like that was the scene. So that's what made me interested in this movie.
And then so then
apparently
after
it was partially inspired by many artists, but H.R. Giger was one, and that very much feels like it with like the tail going under and everything, like. Yeah, just the way that was shot and everything. Something about the aesthetic of this film as far as the imagery of anything creepy, the feel of it almost feels like a form, like doesn't feel like an American film at times. You know what I mean? It feels like this is almost a French film or something. Just I don't know, something about the texture to it and kind of the way it handles a lot of things. Like it is absolutely American in that, like the setting and everything else and the characters, but something about it feels far removed from American horror films or thriller films from that time.
Yeah, and I think this was right. I think
Yeah.
because like this one was so different from the time period that you saw stuff that you typically did not see in this. Like, as they didn't even become popular for probably another 10 years, really. I mean, so you get you kind of like get like an early.
It felt more naturalistic than a lot, like the way it was lit, shot, everything. It just felt. I don't know. I think they really tried to ground you in his perspective on this and make it feel as real as possible. You know, doing all the in-camera stuff, which, granted, digital effects weren't really big until they didn't really start getting really big until like Jurassic Park and stuff. You know, like, oh, we can do this. But yeah, just something about how grounded everything felt from the way it was shot, the performances, all that really led to, I think, the success of how this film was able to like pull off what it did.
Well, I think too, like in the era this was released, I'm trying to think. So you had this, and then the same general like time range of a few years, you had Silence of the Lambs, because you had the transition from 80s horror where you had a lot of slasher characters with, you know, Freddy and Jason and Michael Myers, and you had those kind of fizzle out towards, you know, the end of the 80s, early 90s. So you kind of had like that era, and the slasher era was kind of done. And you had some of the more high concept stuff. I remember like Child's Play was kind of at the tail end of all that in the late 80s, early 90s, of like a possessed doll. So there was different. And then you had like the late 80s, you had in 86 was that Aliens. So you had like the sci-fi horror turn and a lot of that stuff. But this and Silence of the Lambs feel kind of more like highbrow horror at the early 90s, before it then in the mid to late 90s devolved into all the slasher throwbacks and all this stuff that then, you know, the early 2000s kind of things changed over to the Japanese remakes.
Then
and
you
the
also
torture
had
porn.
like a bunch of like rip-offs of Silence of the Lambs. You know, you had a bunch of movies that kind of mimic that.
We covered.
But
we
like,
covered one of them, yeah.
Yeah, because I remember reading like talking about like the best horror films, and somebody was saying, you know, like Silence of the Lambs versus Jacob's Ladder, and it's like, well, that's really like a good 1-2 punch from that era. And you know, just thinking through, like, if David Lynch had directed Jacob's Ladder, I think he may have been he probably been a little bit too obscure with it. And a little, because if you think about it, this is the movie where a character wakes up in like multiple iterations or, you know, versions of their life, which is a very common theme amongst David Lynch work. But I think that this one, the straightforward nature of the presentation of what was happening was a little kind of grounded a little bit. I think if you went too obscure with this, then it becomes just more abstract and kind of hard to follow.
I saw Sidney Lumet was also another one. I would be interested to see his take on it. But I think this is a good blend of leaning into the genre elements, and when I say that is like, hey, we're gonna put some actual horror into this. Like he wasn't afraid to put in those horror effects. He wasn't like, I don't want to put in too many horror effects because it's gonna be cheesy or whatever. Like I think there was enough in there, and it didn't pull you out of it. And it, you know what I mean? There was a right amount where you could almost see Ridley Scott. He could have maybe went too far in that direction. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Like I think too much in the thriller aspect.
Yeah, or too much in the effects and really concerned with like building up the drama, which, you know, love Silence of the Lambs, but also that is a very tightly constricted thriller. Like, you know what I mean? It feels like it is paced so well and everything. This maybe all the time isn't paced perfectly all the time. Like it feels very loose, but I think it almost works in its favor. Like that it doesn't feel like this film is perfectly constructed like something like Silence of the Lambs. That's also a difference there too, where that feels like a perfectly constructed thriller. This just almost even feels more closer to reality than that.
One thing I think I'd like to see in a remake of this, which I don't think we'll see in the current remake, maybe it will, but something where it's like, you know, what was the GameCube video game that we used to play? Eternal Darkness. Because this kind of reminds me of that a little bit too, because there are certain scenes where like you're walking through a hallway and you see like a paint, everything's normal, but there's like a weird painting. And what I kind of like to see in remake is this just plays with reality, like stuff in the background. And this probably did that some a little bit, but just
isn't that what House on Haunted Hill or the Haunting on Hill House? Did they do a little bit of that in the background?
Did a little bit where it would just be like you would see ghosts and different things. But I think something like that, you could play a lot more with that now and just have like stuff that's just, you know, very unsettling in the background.
Well, and then
you don't really know what's real, what's fake, what's going on. I think that's that's where stuff like this I think is fun.
So you
can throw a little bit of weirdness
because the movie has these kind of different elements in the imagery of like demons or demonic characters or scary things going on, and then you have the Jason Alexander subplot, which is where Tim Robbins, like some of his Vietnam veteran buddies, some of the veterans get together because they've all been seeing things and experiencing the same type of thing, and then they go to a lawyer to try and get a lawsuit started to find out what happened. And then they go to Jason Alexander, so pre-Seinfeld, pre-George Costanza.
Was it?
It was 1990.
I thought Seinfeld was 89.
I thought Seinfeld didn't start till...
It was filmed in 89, so it may have... He was already... George
he may have shot this film right before he shot the first episode of Seinfeld. You know, he may have shot this. They may have been in post for a while, but it was right there. You know, release time. And granted, Seinfeld wasn't popular when it first came out. They had a lot of problems, so I don't know if anybody would have saw, hey, George Costanza. You know what I mean? Most audiences wouldn't have.
Now you would. Like, George Costanza.
Yeah, I'm a moron. It was in 89, so this was before. So I just keep screwing up all the timelines. But yeah, so you have this subplot where they go to a lawyer and they try to get figured out. And then the other people that are involved in the lawsuit drop out, and Tim Robbins gets captured by some guys in a black car, and they threaten him to stop looking into it, and he manages to escape and gets injured in the process, and a Salvation Army Santa steals his wallet. So when he later tells people that Santa stole his ID, they're like, oh, okay, let's put him in the psych ward. But then you go to the hospital, and it's like this very gruesome, scary, demonic-looking hospital with like body parts just strewn about and demonic imagery, and that's where there's like the half-man imagery.
Yeah.
And
I love when he's getting rolled through and he's looking above him, and it's like everybody on that like plexiglass. You know what I mean? Like crawling across, like that's just, man, that's just.
One thing I like too, though, is like, like 9 Inch Nails and Tool are watching. It's like, yes. It's like their imagery.
So
that found my thing.
You know, in the Back to the Future,
I wonder if he directed any of their music videos. I would have tried to get him.
When Back to the Future, when Marty's playing Johnny Be Good at the high school dance, and the guy's like, Chuck, there's something you might want to hear. So it's like, while somebody's watching the movie, they call Trent Reznor. It's like, Trent, there's something you might want to watch, and they hold the phone up to it, and he's like, well, I can't see it. But yeah, so all that imagery stuff, and that was apparently where they cut stuff out, and I like to see what got cut.
Well, yeah, I think
then sometimes less is more. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah. Well, I mean, like, I would just like to see what it was.
I'll dig that out. I'm sorry I didn't.
Well,
do it before
this.
I didn't even think about it. But like that's definitely like Silent Hill pulled from that wholesale, because you have scenes in Silent Hill that take place in the hospital, and you have the nurses, and you have like the creepy, jittery movement. And it's like, so this is directly where that came from.
But maybe the cut scene is just like one of the creepy nurses or half man like drops his banana. He's like, damn it.
And that's
just doing very mundane.
And that's also
stuff.
when they're doing like the procedures on him. The doctors tell him like, you're dead.
Yes. Yeah.
So it's just like very explicitly stating the state of the film.
So it kind of switches into like, first we have this mystery film where we don't know the realities and everything, and then it switches almost into like a conspiracy thriller in some regards, in the second half, which I quite liked, because I'm not saying it didn't start.
It changes the pace up.
It does change the pace, because, like, again, I think this film is a little loose. It's not perfectly constructed. It wasn't, like, at a 10 out of 10 excitement or engagement level the whole time.
Yeah.
But it kept me interested. And then that shift, even though that was more genre heavy, I like that as well. And that is something also, we talked about David Lynch. I think at this time, I think it was easier to follow most of his films. It's in between, like, say, Blue Velvet, Twin Peaks, Fire Walk with Me, and then what was the Nick Cage one?
Wild at Heart.
Wild at Heart. Granted, Eraserhead was further back, but I think he probably would have kept a good balance in this era. But if you look at something like Lost Highway, that is also something like this, where you don't know what reality is real, and then this is also about kind of changing people, even though he's always the same character, it's just different parts of his life. And then also the thriller aspect, like, Lynch leans into the genre stuff too to keep you engaged. And this kind of does the same thing, but in its own way.
Well, I think with this movie that you need to keep all the different, realities or the different plots within this movie done from a pretty straightforward fashion. Because if you get too abstract, and you have him looking at a lamp for 20 minutes.
The goal of this, I think, is Tim Robbins' character is a vestige for Vietnam vets, you know what I mean, suffering PTSD, and also the chemical testing and everything they did, which I guess, the drug that they mentioned at the end of the film was not exactly like it was presented in this movie. It wasn't like it was supposed to be tested on enemy combatants and Agent Orange and all that.
There was no evidence that that type of drug is tested on American soldiers, but they just used that general idea that maybe it was the concept.
So, that is the goal of this, is maybe slight awareness. It could have been used as a jumping off point to make, this interesting film, but I think he is supposed to be kind of an image for Vietnam vets, whereas something like Lost Highway, that is, he's not there as a replacement for any specific type of person, but it is just more the internal. You know what I mean? Like, he is his own person, but it's almost something that's inside of everybody, possibly.
Yeah. I think something that is interesting with this movie, though, is like, I like movies that when they're done, you still have something to think about, because this is very much one of those movies where there's a lot to think about and discuss about it. And it's like, so are the other people in his reality, like the other Vietnam guys, are they dead too? Like,
I think that he's not. So I think, like, digging into trying to interpret the film, I think that everybody he interacts with in the world is just a figment of his imagination. Essentially he's living in a matrix.
Yeah.
And everyone else is a NPC, computer controlled character.
But it also, that's what I gathered from it. I was going to ask you guys just because I first time watched and I didn't really look up anything about the ending. I more just looked up a little bit of the drug and all that and was just kind of thinking about it. But then what does it say? I guess putting that disclaimer, the text up at the end about the drug testing and stuff, or chemical testing, that kind of does its job, but it's like, okay, that whole drug thing, it's like he fabricated that in his mind. It almost made you feel like, oh, that wasn't real. The government didn't do that, when actually, that was kind of the point of the story too. Yeah. So it's a weird thing where it kind of neglects and gets rid of that once you see the full ending, but also it wants you to acknowledge that and bring awareness to it. It's kind of a weird thing.
You have the element of, when he's dying in Vietnam, so you don't get confirmation if the memories that he has, in this kind of hell world or purgatory or whatever, like the memories that he has, you don't know if those are true to what happened in the real world. So when you see his flashbacks of Vietnam where it's a fellow soldier that stabbed him, a fellow American soldier that stabbed him, that caused him to die, like, you don't know if that's really what happened.
Yeah.
I would assume it is.
And maybe he was slowly putting all this stuff together in his mind. You know what I mean? Where he's like, after seeing his buddies freak out and then getting stabbed, maybe he was slowly like, oh wait, the chemical. You know what I mean? Who knows? It could have been from other things. I'm interested to. I would be interested to see if there are direct interpretations from like the director on this. Yeah. You know what I mean? And see what they think. But I think it's pretty open.
Because I would assume that the movie was he got injured in battle. And the entire movie from that point forward is just him in the process of dying and letting go. Mm-hmm. And, so not taking place over the course of years or whatever, but just taking place, being, those few minutes being spiraled out into a lot of time in his head. And, and at one point in the movie, like the chiropractor is like his confidant and friend that, helps him with his back, and then when he gets taken to the hospital, comes in and gets him out of the hospital, and gives him an adjustment and fixes his health.
And he says, like, you look like an angel. I mean, essentially, so the whole theme of the movie is, I forgot what's the direct line. It's about.
He's like, you think they're without paraphrasing it, but just trying from memories. It's not you think they're devils because they're tearing away all your lives and memories, but it's really once you make peace with it, they're actually angels removing all your connections before your soul is free.
Yeah, you kind of need to let go and just accept things and death. And I guess it's the two parts of pulling him. One part of him not being able to let go, which is the hell in the hospital and all that he's going through. But then his chiropractor is helping him trying to let go of those things, essentially, and he ends up winning in the end, I guess. And then he passes on.
Yeah, because he gets back to his home that was his pre-war home.
Yeah.
And his, son guides him up the stairs as he passes through the light or whatever you want to call it.
It's funny to know that in your last moments of life, you also may still be horny for the woman that works in the mailroom. You've made up this whole relationship because of her thighs, apparently.
Yeah. Or I mean, and two,
He's
like
not thinking about his ex-wife. He's thinking about the woman in the mailroom.
The mailroom.
well, I guess too though.
Is that lust? You know what I mean? I don't know. But then again, that person, she was, I guess, in some way helping him get rid of those little memories because she burns his photographs. You know what I mean? Like, it's a weird, there's a lot to unpack with this film.
So I guess that prior to going to the, I don't know, I don't remember the exact timeline of events. Like if he was divorced before he went to the war or after.
I don't know.
Well, because too, like the movie didn't make clear. I guess the movie was set in the time frame of around the war. It wasn't set in present day 1990.
Yeah, that's what I was also trying to catch up
the
on
movie
too,
was set in
'cause-
75, right?
Okay,
yeah,
was it?
because
Okay.
it jumps from like I think what 71 or
Just
70,
say 5 years later
and then
or
it's like 5 years later. So
Yeah,
it's in
Because
okay, I
the
remember
idea
that
would have
now.
been that after the death of his son, his marriage ended.
Yeah.
And after his marriage ended, then he, went from having whatever job he had before the war, where he had, a high-paying job that, required him having multiple degrees, to working at the post office. Because they even make a line in the movie about that, about how he just wanted to shut his brain down and not do all the same stuff after the war. And
I get that. I mean, not that I was in war at all, but I understand. Like even having certain jobs before, I'd be like, I just want to quit and go, not disparaging, but I was like, I just want to go work at the pizza place down the street. You know what I mean? Like when I work at the TV station, there's like you're balanced to so much stuff, and I'm just like, nah, I just want to go work at the. You know what I mean? I want to go there, do my job, and leave. Yeah, and not have to worry about solving any problems. Really, you know what I mean?
Too, like once you've seen life and death, ending. Once you've seen a lot of life ending and a lot of death and things,
you
and
probably
war,
don't get worked up about numbers and you know what I mean, like
seeing a bunch of spreadsheets probably
Yes,
seems far more mundane and pointless. I mean, because even if you haven't seen that stuff, there's points where you can be like, man, this is all just meaningless nothing. But I mean, like this movie, when I saw this when I was in middle school, didn't really grasp exactly, because like this movie portrays kind of like a hellish vision of like, so once you die, you have to go through hell to let go of all of your memories in life to then move on.
And you said this was originally called Dante's Inferno, right?
Yeah, I think it was like a temp title or something. And this was a movie that's been a few years on the blacklist of like best unproduced screenplays. And it was, a movie, I think there was different versions. Like at one point Universal was going to, or some studio was going to do it, but then they ended up dropping it. And then it got picked up by someone else and finally got made. Because I think this is the type of movie that you just sit there and read the script and you're like, probably a lot of people read it like, oh, I love this. I don't want to make this.
Yeah, like I don't know if this is going to make money, which they were right as far as
because it's just one of those movies where it's like, is it a good movie? Yes, but just because it's a good movie doesn't mean it's gonna have mass appeal and make a lot of money.
Yeah, your trailer might not sell people.
Like, this
and that's what the financiers. That's what a lot of them their jobs are.
Oscar buzz or anything at the time?
I have never heard anything about it.
It got decent reviews, not amazing reviews.
Yeah.
But yeah, like this wasn't a movie where, it was because like Silence of the Lambs won Best Picture and had, Anthony Hopkins won an Oscar. Like this movie wasn't nominated across the board like that.
Yeah, I just wonder because it is a good movie. So I
think that there is because I mean, too, this movie, I think if it had stuck more to the genre roots and had more of the scary imagery, it may have done better. But then again, like movies like Hellraiser and stuff that had all that imagery, there's a certain cap for how much they make.
Well, yeah, and this, I guess this movie definitely does have a little bit of Hellraiser aspect to it too, which is something I'm surprised we didn't even bring up yet, because there's certain imagery that I think you kind of be like, oh, that's kind of Hellraiser-ish.
Well, I think anything you're trying to evoke imagery of hell, you're gonna cross over with some other films that have covered similar material.
So in the trivia stuff, it says writer Bruce Jill Rubin, he wrote the script after having a dream in the early '80s about being trapped. In the early '80s, he had a dream about being trapped in a subway. Wrote it, and he was told Hollywood doesn't make ghost movies. And then after he wrote Ghost in 1990, and then he also made the successful. Or coupled with the success of Alan Parker's Angel Heart, then they became open to it. But, again, didn't do great. You know what I mean? But you have those studio heads that take a chance and like, okay, we're going to make a lot of money on this end. We're going to take a chance on this one because, Hollywood isn't going to make these sort of movies. a certain type of movie until somebody does, and it becomes a breakout hit, and then they're all going to make those movies. You know what I mean? Like you got to have people take those risks, but sometimes your studio has to be in the position where they can take the risk, and they do have a little bit of cash to lose if they, if that happens. It's
it's just weird sometimes because you can make a good movie, but it doesn't mean it's going to be successful.
Yeah.
Then you make a bad movie and it's highly successful.
Or people aren't ready for it, because they aren't maybe primed for it. You know what I mean? They're like, oh, I'm not used to seeing this stuff because people always want to see what they're used to seeing. They want that comfort.
I think another movie this kind of reminds me of, as far as how it would have been sold at the time, is what's a World War II movie? Overlord, because they're very different. But it's like, what do you sell this movie as?
Yeah.
Is this a ghost story? So is this a conspiracy
if you
story?
sell it, so if you were to, like, I have to go back and look up the trailers for it, but if you sell it showing the kind of creepy imagery from, like, the subway and the party and the hospital stuff, and you intercut it with stuff about the kind of conspiracy thriller plot about the Vietnam stuff, I think you'd have a lot of people disappointed when they get to the movie and it's more contemplative and not as straightforward and genre heavy as that. And then if you market it on the more spiritual elements and things like that, then you get people who are like, I don't want to see this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So then it's like this weird balance with movies. Because you mentioned like Overlord. That's a movie where I think they marketed it kind of wrong or incorrectly. They marketed it in a way that didn't sell its strengths. Because they're trying, I think a lot of times if you try to hide the mystery of what it is, like there's a certain element of, if somebody had never seen the Jacob's Ladder and they had never heard anything about it and they go in and watch it, I think the effect at the end is greater than if you like already know all the big plot twists. Like I still enjoyed it a lot and got a lot out of it rewatching it as an adult. But I think if I had not known anything about it, the experience would have been a little bit more engrossing just at the end, just because anytime there's a movie that it ends in a way where you weren't expecting what happened, you can never recapture the feeling of not knowing that and watching it, which is why for a lot of movies I don't watch trailers. A lot of stuff if I know I'm in on who's the creative team behind it, I just go watch it without trying to know as little as possible, because marketing in today's world is very bad about spoiling very big plot points that they definitely shouldn't spoil.
Yeah, and you can never get that back. And sometimes that things hinge on that, and you have that one great moment of the ending. So that's why sometimes when there's some stuff that I love and I'm like pushing people to watch, it's because I'm like, I don't even want to tell you that there's something really good at the end. You know what I mean? I just want to say, gee, you're just gonna watch it. You may not watch it unless I push you further and tell you a little bit. But it's a balance for sure.
Well, because like when you think of like modern movies, like even some big budget popcorn movies like Thor Ragnarok, when it has the Hulk in it, that was a big part of the advertising. But imagine how blown away people would have been if they didn't know that was going to happen and that character shows up. Which
honestly, they did that with Avengers Endgame, where they showed very little in the trailer, and you had no idea what even the plot of that movie was. Yeah. You know what I mean? They were able to do it at that point, because Thor, I mean, they were trying to revitalize that franchise, I think, the Thor franchise. I think they had to say, hey, even if you don't like Thor, Hulk's in here. You know what I mean? Like, I think that was a good move, because even though I love that director and stuff, I didn't even go see Thor. I mean, part of, having a kid, I'm busier, but I love that director. You know what I mean? I like Chris Hemsworth a whole lot. But I didn't see it in theaters, and I saw all the other ones because I was like, I'm not big on Thor. I bet this is awesome, but I was also super busy. But even though I was really busy when Endgame came out, I still went to see that one. You know what I mean?
What I like though is Thor is a character that anybody can make a movie about. So they should just flood the market with this horrible Thor movies.
Well, because Asylum has made ones, because Thor is is a character from like mythology, so you can use it. You just can't use the specific interpretation that exists in the movies and comics. But getting back to like Jacob's Ladder and stuff, is just I wish I had not seen this in middle school and just seen it as an adult.
Yeah. But also too, I knew a lot of stuff about this movie. You know what I mean? Like, it's somewhere in the middle.
Well, just like if you're interested in horror movies, like again, like I always watch like the Bravo Top 100 or whatever,
you see so much
and then
about
you see so much about it. Or they're not the only ones.
But they've got to do that, because if you hadn't seen so much Bravo stuff, you know what I mean? Like none of us maybe would have checked it out.
And two, if you talk like the sad thing is you're talking about movies, a lot of times you tell somebody, it's like, okay, go watch Jacob's Ladder. It's a movie where Tim Robbins is a Vietnam vet and he comes back and sees creepy things, and then they want to know, well, what happens? Yeah. you can't just give them that and then they go watch it. Most people need more.
Here's what they need.
There's a half guy on a gurney.
Here's what they need to make a film series, and it's like the films inspired by Silent Hill. That would maybe get some butts in seats. You know what I mean? Have a little film.
Do you remember
series.
that scene from Arrested Development where George Michael and
He's
his
like the
dad?
half man on the skateboard.
Yes, that's this movie. Go watch it.
No, I don't remember that.
No,
Yeah,
It's,
it's like the
George
George
Michael-
skateboard's not going to touch you this time.
Oh yes, I do. Yeah. Have you guys seen Kids?
No,
You haven't? There's a guy half man on a skateboard in that, and he's singing a song "I Have No Legs" in the subway around on it. You know what I mean? I think that's probably maybe what they.
So that's
pulled that
imagine
from.
this, but 2 hours long. Go watch it.
Something else that reminded me of Arrested Development. On Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, they talk about George Maharis as like an actor.
Yeah.
And then in Arrested Development, George Michael goes by George Maharis. So it's like they have like these like little Easter eggs, these old Hollywood actors and stuff. But yeah, so like with the movie Jacob's Ladder, like you definitely see where the inspiration. It is kind of funny because it's cyclical, because I think that this like Jacob's Ladder had influence or some influence on Japanese filmmakers or Japanese creatives, because in the Japanese movies like The Ring and all that stuff, I'm not sure when all the dates of creation were, but you can see like a cyclical nature of the types of things that inspire.
But
Again, like even, I don't know how to market movies. I'm just going to sit here and just say bull crap, even though I don't know the best ways. These people that do it, they know the science. But even like the Jacob's Ladder remake trailer, like I would almost say, hey, this is based on a remake on a cult horror thriller that inspired Silent Hill. You know what I mean? Like that might do something. You know what I mean? Like I know you can't just cram it with every little thing, but Silent Hill's like there's an audience there. You know what I mean? Like they made a couple movies. Like it has a name recognition.
They made a lot of games,
and it is way more well known and relevant than Jacob's Ladder. You know what I mean? That's the thing.
Honestly,
like, why are you making a remake? Well, because there was an old name, and maybe they loved the film, but you got to sell it too. Figure out.
You could it is almost Silent Hill the movie.
Yeah.
Take out
but also
the mining
too.
town.
But if you do that, people are gonna be like, "Oh, there's not enough genre stuff." You know what I mean? Like, there's too much drama. You can't go too far with it. But it's anyway. So
But if you went all just genre stuff, you'd be so genred out by the end.
Yeah,
of it.
exactly,
You'd be like, oh my
exactly.
God,
Well,
there's another half.
I think the other thing too, though, is
Too many half men.
If you just have a bunch of creepy imagery throughout the film, then it reduces the effectiveness when it shows
For
up.
sure.
Because in the scene where he's at the party and he sees like the creepy demon stuff, that's scary in the moment. But if the entire movie is full of that, and you see
Then it almost becomes
I don't know
goofy.
why, but that moment too gave me vibes of the Super Mario Brothers movie. I don't know if it's like the lizard tail and
because
the
it kinda-
style of the dancing. You know what I mean? It just feels like their party scene.
everybody get on the floor,
Yeah.
everybody do the dinosaur.
We should intercut those two scenes together and have John Leguizamo and what's his name? Bob Hoskins.
Yeah.
And then Dennis Hopper.
Yeah, Dennis Hopper.
But Dennis Hopper from Blue Velvet. But yeah, there's like these kind of weird juxtapositions of, I think that seeing like the creepy subway scene, because that kind of sets the tone. And then you come back to it a little bit throughout. Because I think if you just had the entire movie be full tilt creepy imagery, then it really wears out its welcome and achieves the opposite effect.
Well, how do you
it's
keep
going
that
for.
energy up? How do you keep
Yeah,
that up?
you
Because
can.
so many of those moments are so good. You know what I mean? Yeah, if you have any that are lesser than, then it starts diminishing in the good ones. So I think every time they sprinkle it in there, it's very well handled. And you look at it and you're like, oh my God, there's something unsettling about that face. And you only see it for a
I
second.
think
You know,
too that
driving in a car
and this is a
or
movie
in a window.
where at the end of the day, the imagery you see in the movie is less scary than the story it presents.
Yeah.
Because when you think about like that's literally what like in that world and the because each time you talk about like screenwriting books, it's like when you're the screenwriter, you're God. With the little G.
Yeah.
You're the person that created and controlled this world, and you set the rules for it. So in the world that's created in this film, that's scary as hell. That's what happens when everybody dies.
Something else about me, again, this is like minor, but speaking of Dante's Inferno, a film that kind of relates to that as well, that somewhat recently is The House that Jack Built. Lars von Trier with Matt Dillon. You guys remember that
I'm
trailer?
aware of it. I have not seen
Yeah, I
it
watched it back last year before our end of the year stuff, just to make sure, like, hey, is this going to be something where I'm like, you guys have to see it? And it wasn't that, but I've seen people ask recently, like, is this worth seeing? And like, yeah, I think it is. Like, I'm not really recommending it to a lot of people, but there's stuff in that film I think about a lot. And the only reason I'm bringing it up now is because there's like a Dante's Inferno element to it that I think is I like the way that's handled as well. But that's a film that's very loose, and you just got to be willing to sit there and watch it and just say, hey, I'm just going to sit here for a few hours and just let it play out, and don't expect it to rush through, because it takes its time. But it's very funny too. That was the surprising thing about the movie. It's very funny, and there's a lot of dark humor in it at times. But that's also another Dante's Inferno-esque film.
Everybody do the dinosaur. Yeah. But yeah, so Jacob's Ladder, like I said, it's a movie that when you get done watching it, it's like, okay, I feel sad now. And I mean, and that's a testament to the movie, because a lot of movies don't leave you with any effect. You watch a lot of horror films. So like on the prior podcast, which is actually going to be the one we're recording next, because we're recording things out of order. So like Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark left me with nothing.
That's a movie.
And this movie I came out, and I think too, watching this movie again just before seeing the other one made the other one stand in stark contrast of like, oh, this all felt weightless to me. And granted, one's a PG-13 movie that's aimed at younger people.
And one's revered as like, an essential horror film, one of the essential horror films of all time. You know what I mean? Like
yeah, but I think like, we always kind of talk about like, regardless if a movie's good or bad, if you can continue to talk about it, it did something.
Well, I think
this movie did a lot of something, because I think it's something you could have a lot of conversations about, because two people could watch it and interpret some of it vastly different. Because I think there's some parts that like, that is how it is. But you can interpret a lot of the middle stuff however you wanted.
Yeah, because like we had to make our own interpretation as to was it that it was a shared hell between people that are really still alive interacting, or is it all just a world created for him specifically in his mind that he's navigating through?
Again, I don't know if I brought this up several times on the podcast. I think I have, but David Lynch, he says leave room to dream at the end. That's how you make a good story, is when you don't close everything off perfectly, because then there's nothing to even think about. You leave room to dream about what actually is going on, or you know what I mean. That's what this film does.
That's kind of why something like Blade Runner was so good, because at the end of it, it left a lot.
Is Deckard a replicant or not?
Or even at the end of the most recent.
Is Deckard a replicant?
But like when you look at movies that leave lasting impacts and why they're good, that's it. That may be good or bad depending on how you feel the movie, but at least you got something to talk about.
So I think that there's also the element of a lot of mainstream audiences walk out. They want a movie that goes from point A to point B and gives you all the information in between and leaves it off, so you leave the theater knowing everything that existed in that world.
But I think this film also is satisfying enough in that regard.
I think a lot of the movies that do that leave you with everything and leave it off where it's a nice, neatly tied bow, those are movies people don't remember 10 years later. Yeah. It's a lot of these movies. There's like the rare movie that makes a lot of money, gets critical acclaim, and is a good movie that you talk about years later, like Silence of the Lambs or something. Mm-hmm. But then there's a lot of movies, like think back to like what was the highest grossing movie from 1993? Like I don't remember, but I remember like the weird things I saw are the movies that like left some type of impact. So
like RoboCop.
So giving this movie a score out of 10, where we land. So Derek, what would you give this out of 10?
It's a 7 out of 10. It's a good movie. It really is. It's something that leaves you thinking, but it's like, I'd watched it before, probably more recently than you all had. So
I had never watched it. So definitely.
So you never watched it. I'd watched it within the last 10 years, and William had watched it within the last 20 years. So, and it's a movie I don't really think I've ever seen on TV. Like, I don't remember ever having watched this movie on TV at any point.
So Jurassic Park was the highest grossing film.
I was about to say, wasn't Jurassic Park 93?
Let's pick a different year.
94.
Yeah, I think Jurassic Park was 93, but I'm like, that's beside his point.
But like, I think it's I don't know, it's a good movie. It's something I would definitely recommend to horror or genre fans.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Now, like your general movie watcher, it's still a very good film. I think that's what it is. Like, is this a good film? Yes, it is. It is not just a good genre.
You would have said you need to watch Jacob's Ladder.
Yeah.
In 2019, there's been a lot of stuff come out. Yeah, this wouldn't be the first one you'd recommend.
It wouldn't be the first one, but it's like
Yeah.
if you're just like, especially with Halloween coming up and you're looking to set the mood of that time period. If this is a movie, it wouldn't be at the top of my list. Like, you got to watch it, but it'd be something like, if you're looking
another
for stuff
movie
to
too.
watch,
If you're similar to me and you hadn't watched it since high school or middle school, or
it's definitely worth a revisit.
It's definitely worth pulling it back out. And if it's on Amazon, you can watch it that way. And I do want to see what.
Yeah, because this is more than just a genre movie. It is overall a good movie, but it has. I think that's a lot of times you can get into horror stuff that sometimes it might just only be good at one
They're
or the two.
existing for the genre.
See,
on that, yeah.
so
Yeah,
now
but this one actually has. If you just took
has a
out,
point.
if you took out the genre stuff, and this was just a thrill about what happened to them in Vietnam, it's
Yeah.
still interesting.
Yeah.
So looking at that, so the top grossing movies in 1994 were Forrest Gump, Lion King, and True Lies.
So terrible.
Yeah.
Quit picking the 90s.
96 was Independence Day and Twister.
Yeah, so there was still like good movies. So like 95.
I don't know.
movies, I
My
believe.
point was just a lot of times the movies that are 4-quadrant crowd pleasers in the theater don't leave much to come back to later. And especially too with movies that are sequelized or whatever. Because like Forrest Gump is a movie I think it's lost a lot of its luster in recent years if you revisit it.
Well,
yeah.
Toy Story. I wasn't saying 95, but that was Toy Story. So and Batman Forever. So and Apollo 13.
Batman Forever it's
Hey,
cinematic.
People
it's
talk about that
cinematic.
film almost daily on Twitter.
Hey, but
so-
then the third is Apollo 13. So it's like, okay, so maybe that period of the 90s.
But
is
I remember,
not
I've only
great.
watched Apollo 13 once.
Okay.
When it came out, and I still remember
Let's-
parts of that.
Yeah,
Let's
that's Kevin Bacon, right?
Hardy's had the
Batman Returns is 92. So the 90s is
So okay, Derek, you need to stop this.
No, we're good.
Just
This, is
prove
what,
me
the,
I'm
this is
wrong.
what the podcast is now because 91 was
Okay.
T2.
Okay, okay. Here's the thing. Let's
just picked a terrible
let's
decade.
shift.
Go back to when Jaws came out,
No,
right before
no,
Jaws.
No.
97's Titanic, so the 90s is all bad.
Okay, let's reverse that. Let's go to the 2000s. What was the highest grossing movie of 2006?
Let's see.
Oh, it's gonna be
Pirates of the Caribbean, Dead Man's
which you've seen all
Chest.
those, right?
Which is a
Yeah.
bad movie.
That's not great. Yeah, so the 90. Let's just see. The 98's got to be bad because like at some point you're going to run out of stuff.
No.
No,
They can't-
98 would have been
No, Armageddon. So Armageddon's not good. That's-
Saving Private Ryan.
Saving Private Ryan was number 2, but number 1's Armageddon, and Godzilla's
I
number
just
3.
started watching that again the other day.
We should just do a
99 would
podcast
be a-
only about the highest grossing movies of the year. Star Wars Episode 1, Phantom Menace.
I've never
So,
seen
Sixth Sense.
What's Star Wars?
Sixth Sense and Toy
What's
Story
Star
2.
Wars and Sixth Sense?
Hey, Awesome Powers, Spy Shag Movies, number 4, 99.
It's psychedelic, baby. But
So-
yeah, so
you don't
okay.
see comedy like straight comedies hit the 4th highest grossing
No,
film of all time.
behind-
You'll never see that again.
Yeah. Anyway, it's just funny looking at like what the movies are. It's like the 90s were just a bad period of not because all the movies were good.
Yeah,
Top
they're all pretty.
grossers.
But okay, but that was also when they still made original films for adults, not based on comics or reboots or relaunches of a franchise.
Yeah.
So give it like Jacob's Ladder. Like I give it like a 9
Star
out of
Wars.
10. I give it like a 9 out of 10. I give it a high rank. I think it's something definitely that warrants a rewatch, just because it did leave me thinking about a lot of stuff afterwards, and it did evoke a lot of imagery in my mind that the movie itself didn't even show. So it's a movie I'd recommend giving another watch if you haven't, and it's one that if you have people that are into film itself and into horror that aren't just the give me the newest movie that replicates the experience of Friday the 13th Part 3, then this is something to recommend.
Now, okay, hear me out real quick. Something that I think would
Wait,
be
part 4 is better. You son of a bitch.
no, something that'd
That's
be-
all that horror Facebook
Like-
groups are.
Something that would be interesting is if they took like if they ever reboot Nightmare on Elm Street, go this route.
Oh,
And
yeah.
do a psychological, this horrific imagery thing where instead of him just killing people, he maybe have already killed
It's
them.
Robert England. Yeah.
but here's the
Just
problem
like-
with that: if it's not Robert Englund, like sucks.
Yeah, but here's the thing is,
It doesn't
as
have-
much as I love. That's my favorite of the like. We want to say the Power 3, the big 3 of like Halloween, Friday the 13th,
And Critters.
Yeah, Critters. Like that's me is the most fun to go back and watch. But I'm saying that movie is so. You could do so much manipulation with it and have so much fun with it in just a
That's how
super
you can
genre way.
reinvent it,
That's how you reinvent it because you can have so much more fun with that than like Halloween. How
Where
many
it's not
times?
the ninth Freddy film or ninth Nightmare on Elm Street film where somebody's wearing a red and green sweater,
Yeah.
with a claw. Like,
or like Halloween, you got a
people
bunch
be
of
so
geriatrics
people
out
be
there
so
fighting
mad.
each
People
other.
be so
If
mad,
you-
but I'd be on board with that.
But, like, if you literally said the Nightmare on Elm Street concept is just somebody that can manipulate dreams and go this metaphysical route, you might make a great movie, but you wouldn't make any money, unfortunately, because people are so
Yeah.
locked into exactly what that franchise
What
is
if-
in their mind.
What if the Matrix, but instead of Agent Smith, it's Freddy
Yeah, I mean,
manipulating everything?
That would be more fun. Like you have so much. But I'm saying you look at these old movies.
like you've been dreaming the whole time.
Yeah.
I've been playing with you. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
And
but I'm
he's-
saying is where you look at like something like again, the geriatrics of Halloween. Like how often can we have them just dueling?
But now you're talking about like this concept if it's like a shared dream between a bunch of people that Freddy's manipulating, and there's like the one person that realizes it and is able to be like Neo in the Matrix and fight back or something. That's a fun concept.
Is that not more interesting than like Jason just stabbing some camp counselor in the face 73 times for 20 minutes?
Some people love that stuff though.
But yeah, by the time you get to the 50th stab, you're like, all right, man.
But I mean, like if you just told somebody, it's like, so here's my pitch: The Matrix, but horror, and it's like, well, there was Dark City, so but
that is.
It was the movie that had like Jennifer Connelly and Kiefer Sutherland.
Nobody watched that.
Oh, you haven't seen. So Dark City is the one that people would shout like The Matrix stole from. You should watch that movie. And I don't know if it's true, but there are definitely imagery exactly from that, like waking up in the bathtub and stuff. Like you need to watch that film. It's
I have to go. I think I have I have a weird ass DVD 2-pack that was Cloverfield and Dark City.
I mean, you've watched The Matrix a few times, right?
I've seen The Matrix a lot.
Okay, you definitely need to see Dark City because it's just interesting to watch, but it's also a good movie too. But hardly nobody saw it, especially around that era. You're absolutely right. But I watched it and other people have watched it since then because they're like, hey, The Matrix seems to have ripped this off. And it's like, oh, wow. Like even the aesthetic of like kind of that dark, like, I don't know what the word I'm looking for, but just gothic style almost. And kind of grunge.
With the pre-production leads you needed for films back then and the amount of time special effects and everything took, I don't think that they were stealing from. I think it's just similar
Is there
concepts.
a Dark City comic book though?
I don't know.
Yeah, because they came out pretty close too. So that's the thing. Yeah. It's like they came out very close with how they had to make these things.
99.
Yeah, it's like I couldn't see them really because they didn't write that script in a year, and but they may have seen that film and thought, hey, let's do a couple things like that. I don't know.
This is the last highest grossing I want to talk about because 2001 is a real heavy hitting year. You got Harry Potter, Lord of the Rings, you got Monsters, and Shrek.
I watch Monsters Inc. about 3 times a week now with my dog.
Yeah, I'm saying. But you got like that's a big year. You got the beginning of the Harry Potter series, beginning of the Lord of the Rings.
And 2 are animated.
I'm saying, but that's all billion-dollar franchises. And Shrek Shrek and Monsters were both original properties.
Yeah.
And Harry Potter. That was a book series around the same time. So
let's see. So Dark City was released in.
No, I've been.
Yeah. Let's see. So Dark City was released in February.
Did you say Shrek was original?
Yeah.
No, Shrek was based on a book.
Oh, it is.
Yeah, it's a children's book.
Oh, I know.
Go ahead, William.
So Dark City was released in February of 98 and The Matrix was released in March of 99.
So they could have been existing.
So it was a full year. There could have been some influence, but
man, you got to see Dark City because it's a cool movie too. But yeah.
Well, what are you going to give it, Sean?
I would probably give it like. I was thinking like an 8. It may be 8.5 because I mean, between you guys, like I think it's kind of an essential film. I really appreciate it, and I actually really loved a lot of elements of it. But at the same time, my excitement level watching it wasn't, and too, that's first time watch. Sometimes you watch films like, I might watch a certain David Lynch film, and first time through, I'm like, okay, this is fine. And then I think about it and watch it again. I'm like, oh, this is genius. You know what I mean? It could fluctuate. I'll just go ahead and say 8 out of 10, even though this is a much stronger 8 out of 10 than some that are throwaway films. You know what I mean? In the same regards, it's like, there's plenty of throwaway films that are maybe I would even rate a 9 or 8.5 because they're so much fun. But
this movie
one just feels more essential. Yeah,
this one's not a fun movie.
No,
but it is a very good. I because I watch it by myself. Me and my wife didn't watch it. Now, somebody like her who's never heard of this movie or knows anything about it would probably be fun to just watch her get to see it all unravel because sometimes you get more enjoyment out of that, I think, because I already know it. Because
and honestly, I had to break up my viewing, so that could have hurt it too. But honestly, I think this is one that next year should be, even if it's some small theater, if it's not the studio, this should be re-released.
It'd be fun to watch
I think this would be a good one to watch in theaters with an audience. Even not that people are going to be screaming or anything and yelling, but just to like shut off everything in the outside world and watch this film.
You know what? It'd just be fun to watch in the theater, and people were just the entire time.
Well, the thing that's sad is like a lot of times in October they'll screen horror films at local theaters,
but they always pick the same stuff.
But they always pick the kind of franchise films. Now
because they got to sell tickets.
They gotta sell tickets, Because I still remember like one of my favorite times going to one of those like modern day screenings of an older film was they screened The Thing in the winter and they turned the air conditioning on. So the theater was really cold and they told you ahead of time, like when you show up, it's going to be really cold, so wear a jacket. So you go in this theater, it's like 60, 50 degrees, and
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I appreciate it. And I didn't forget that. I don't know if it was actually fun, though, because like, okay, now turn it on.
well, see, I'm always hot-natured, so
Yeah.
I enjoyed sitting there with my jacket on.
William's just sitting there sweating. It's only 44 degrees in here.
But yeah, so we gave Jacob's Ladder all high marks. Definitely something that's worth a rewatch. You haven't watched it lately.
I'm changing my score 8.5.
And then the remake is yet to be seen what that does, but it doesn't impact the legacy of the original whatsoever because it's so vastly different.
They should just remake it every single year from now on.
The only sad thing is
Every year that the war continues.
there are people though that I have seen. Like the funniest thing to me was at one point we were working on one of the projects and somebody was there who was younger, and I said something about Halloween. And I was like, "Oh, like Halloween?" Like, "Oh yeah, the Rob Zombie movie," and it's like,
all right, well.
So I think people get
That movie
upset.
came out in the 70s, though.
People get mad if like, oh, people don't know about the original, they know about the remake. But there's a lot of things that a lot of people didn't know that The Thing was a remake. Initially, the John Carpenter one, it was in the 50s, was the original film.
Just imagine if Paul W.S. Anderson, whatever his name is,
Paul W.S. Anderson
did a remake of this, and then
starring Mila Jovovich.
Yeah, and then it was in a basement because that's where everything he does is. And then who would be another awful director to have tackled this? Like, I mean, I don't want to, we always say Rob Zombie, so I don't want to say him, but like, give me a Tyler Perry version of this.
Here's the thing, that might be interesting.
Yeah, I mean, it would probably, because that would be, I mean, you give me something like that just like
No, it's
off
like
the wall.
Medea goes to
Medea's
hell.
dead, and this is just her
Oh, and
version
two, we didn't
of
even talk
it.
about like the symbolism, like the movie's called Jacob's Ladder. The drug
Yeah.
was called Ladder. He's Jacob, and there's also the story about Jacob's Ladder, which was like a ladder to heaven and stuff. So a lot of symbolism even in the name.
Yeah.
That we didn't even touch on. But yeah, so all of us gave it high marks. If you're enjoying the podcast, do us a huge favor, leave a review wherever you're listening.
So we'll be at Days of the Dead soon as well, right? When is that?
Labor Day weekend,
Which is
September.
yeah. So this podcast will go out on the 20th, so week and a half or so.
Yes, and then I think as of right now, the idea or the plan is that on what is it, August 31st, I think, because it's Labor Day weekend, right?
Yep.
Yeah,
So
I have
August
it in my
31st
calendar.
on that Saturday, I think the plan is still for us to be at Days of the Dead in Louisville, Kentucky, as they say it in other places, or Louisville, as they say it here. We'll be doing a live podcast, I think at 5:30. I have to look at the time. We'll have more details on it.
I applied
on
for
social
press
media.
passes and told them we were doing that. So hopefully, we've got them before, but the normal contact, I guess, maybe doesn't work with them anymore, right? Is that what you said?
Well, I know that the ownership or the people that ran that splintered off, where it's a different, like,
Yeah.
instead of being like three people running, it's like one person. They may have gotten other people involved.
Yeah.
But, yeah. I mean, but we'll be there, and there will be other local people we've had on the podcast or involvement with the podcast. They'll be there because I think Nathan Thomas Milner is going to be there on Friday to talk at their directors panel or something. And then Jason Crow, that was in Hazard, will be talking at the actors panel. And I think there's going to be a panel about how to get a movie made. So Eric Huskinson, that worked on Volumes of Blood, will be there. I think Antonio Patelho will be there, who made that movie One Must Fall that Julie was in.
I'm wearing the shirt right now.
Oh yeah. So there'll be a number of people there that have been involved with projects or things we've talked about. So you can check that out if you're going to be there, and if you'll be there, you can come give us a shout. I'll try to wear my House of Video. We'll try to have at least one of us wearing a House of Video store.
Yeah, I want to order a new one with the new logo because I have just the old logo from the shirts we have.
I have
like
one that Chad gave me that's
Also-
the new logo.
Well, okay.
We're going to have William just get a facial tattoo.
No. We're going to make Derek have like the little sign that he's going to be flipping around. It's like
William's going to dress up like a remote, and Derek's going to dress up like a giant hand and squeeze you.
There we go.
No, don't do that. All right.
Just hugging the whole time with his hand.
Yeah, so to find all the updates on everything we're doing, follow us on all the social media accounts, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, all those good places. And the website is everything as well at houseofvideostore.com. If you find us specifically on the internet, you can find me on Instagram at the William Caps.
Find me at Caps Derek.
And I'm at Blevin Sean on Twitter.
And that'll wrap up this episode of the House by Video Store podcast. Thanks for listening.